that into their balanced operating budget. I firmly believe that not only our province, but frankly any jurisdiction must have a balanced operating budget. But the fact is that the days of paying for infrastructure cash up front are over. We're growing by approximately 100,000 people every year, which is the city of Red Deer. We need to replicate city of Red Deer every year. But what makes it more difficult is that the population doesn't just grow in one town, it grows throughout the entire province. And no jurisdiction in the world that I know of would have the financial wherewithal to build all that infrastructure, plus catch up to the backlog of infrastructure that hasn't been built and maintained, paying cash up front. Financial advisors, frankly, wouldn't advise us to do so. So we need to take an inventory of the needs, infrastructure needs into this province, and we need to amortize that infrastructure over a number of years. But the fact is this, we have to make a solid commitment to infrastructure for at least 10 years. Because if we want to build this infrastructure, the industry that builds infrastructure must be able to respond to that request. And you may have noticed that during 2006 to 2008, when we were in a bit of a euphoria because price of oil was very high, revenues were unprecedented, the government of Alberta made some commitments, particularly to the road builders. We were going to almost twin every highway and pave every highway. Well, that industry responded. They actually went to the market, they borrowed money, they bought capital, they bought equipment, they ramped up their labor force, then the price of oil dropped through the bottom, and the province turned to them and said, we're canceling most of those contracts. It devastated that industry. That industry requires long-term predictability so that they can ramp up their own capacity, so that they can respond to the requirements of the province. Right now, we don't have that capacity. That's why I always tell everybody, buyer beware when you have candidates running around telling you that they will build 75 additional schools on top of the 50 that we haven't built yet. The fact is that that number, frankly, is irrelevant, because at this point in time, we don't have the capacity in this province to build 75 schools. Our Minister of Education put out a request for proposal on RFP about less than a year ago for 16 schools. Only one bid came back. Because the fact is that all companies are busy, and very few companies in this province can build 16 school buildings throughout the entire province at the same time. So there are some big decisions ahead of us. But the fact is, if I am so lucky to become your premier, I strongly believe that we have to look at diversification of our economy, nurture our economic health moving forward, work very closely with the current economies that we have, and make sure that they are prosperous into the future. But at the same time, we have to shift gears a little, and we have to start investing in Albertans and in our quality of life. That is the determining factor whether we will be or will not be successful on the economic side. Took way more than my 10 minutes, so I will stop now, and I will open myself.
Well, first of all, let's acknowledge him for this.
Any questions?
Before we take questions, first of all, can I summarize your position that if I want to get a space in a daycare, a space in a school, or a space in a nursing home, I have to apply before I conceive of the child. Is that how that works?
That's right.
All right, okay.
That's the reality.
Hard to conceive of, for sure. So we're open for questions. My goal is to allow everyone to get their question answered. So in that, keeping that spirit, I do realize that if you're going to ask a question, you may want to have a preamble. But if it's longer than an hour, I'm going to cut you off. Secondly, I know this is difficult, but I do want you to limit yourself to one question and not 4. And if you're not getting around to asking a question, I may ask you to focus. So, having that set in mind, I'll keep a running list of who wants to ask questions, so we're going to get through everybody. And you can be here to what, 11 or 12? Is that?
Oh, sure.
All right. Okay, but we do have a cutoff, and again, I do want to honor everyone by giving them an opportunity to answer questions, because this is off the record. There are no media here. So this is pretty cool. We're pretty excited about this.
So everybody has Twitter, so it's already out there. Right?
I don't Twitter.
All right, so who'd like to go first? All right, we'll start off with Natasha, and then we'll go to Steve.
So the question I have is, because of the infighting, because of everything, you can have the world's greatest plan, but how are you going to get everyone on the same page? How do you see yourself being able to pull together the Albertan for a commitment and a team together because when you've had such animosity, you can have the greatest ideas, but how are you going to move that forward with the team?
Good question. You know, that's what leadership is really all about. But you, those of you who will choose to engage yourself and vote, you will give me the mandate to deliver on that plan. You have 3 plans that you can choose from, and you will choose one. And the fact is that we have a caucus, and frankly, I'll be honest with you, it's one of the, I've been elected now for almost 14 years, and there's a lot to pick from in that caucus by way of skills and expertise. And I will be picking a much smaller team of cabinet ministers. I'm looking at 50% of the current cabinet, or even less, because I firmly believe in a province of 4 million people, you do not need 30 cabinet ministers. But as MLAs, we know that a leader is chosen, a mandate has been chosen, Albertans have approved of that mandate, and we line up behind the leader. And experience shows, you know, let's go back a number of leadership races. Nancy Betkowski was supposed to be the winner. Ralph Klein came in with minimal support. When he became the leader, caucus lined up and supported him fully, and he had great support from caucus subsequently. Same happened with Premier Stelmach, very little support, but leader was chosen. You line up behind the leader because that is the person Albertans chose. Our job is to serve Albertans, not the leader. If you're telling me that this is the leader of your choice, then I will support that leader, because my fiduciary duty is to reflect what your choice is. Same thing happened actually with Alison Redford. She had 0 caucus support. And caucus did line up. You know, we can debate for only till midnight, you said? There are a number of contributing factors, but I can tell you one thing. For the first year of Premier Alison Redford's tenure, she had no problem with caucus support. Caucus was bending over backwards to make sure that some of the policies that even perhaps we would argue now weren't well thought out initially, that we would deliver on as much as we possibly could. So I'm not concerned about that. Put together a team of strong, committed cabinet ministers. Caucus is vital, and deliver on this mandate. We have 18 months until next election to deliver on change and to reinstill confidence in Albertans and frankly re-earn trust of Albertans. Very short time period. And MLAs will do what you tell them to do.
All right, thank you. Steve, and then Chris.
I'm Steve Chapman. Hey, I don't necessarily agree that we could run a province with 15 cabinet ministers, but that's a separate issue. I have one question in 16 parts. Actually, I have one major question. You have been in office for almost 14 years, which under term limits would mean put you past your prime. But, what are the 2 or 3 most memorable, important things that you have done in those 14 years that would inspire me to elect you as premier?
It's a good question.
Thank you.
You know, the most important work actually that really happens at the constituency office. Where you deal with individual constituents and their issues, and you stick handle their files for them. Usually they come to an MLA's office when they are at the end of their rope, and you affect change. You make their life somewhat better, and from time to time, even 5-10 years later, you get a postcard from them saying, "Thank you for doing what you did. Our life has turned out to be okay." You know, I find that that's what gives me the energy to wake up in the morning. And face the music and do what I do. Because you do truly affect change on a personal level. On a legislative level, you know, a great deal. Number of legislation pieces. Passing the Education Act, for which regs are being drafted right now. This will be the most progressive piece of legislation on education in all of Canada. Other provinces already are looking at this Education Act and borrowing from it to create transformative, inspiring, inquiry-based education for our children. Took a lot of work to get it through, but it worked out very well. You know, working with first responders, our cops and ambulance paramedics and firefighters, and putting together a package of occupational health and safety legislation for them, so that they know when we're running out of fire and they run into the fire, they know that they're covered, and if they don't come out, their family is taken care of, so that they can execute on their work. You know, that to me was very much rewarding. But overall, this is about leadership. And unfortunately, your leadership skills are tested through adversity. You know, everybody can tell you what a great leader they are, but when an actual adversity takes place, that's when you see who runs into the fire and who runs away from the fire. And unfortunately, some of us were tested through a bit of a baptism of fire over the last 2 years. And I tell you, it took a lot of years of my life working in the last administration as deputy premier and having to stand up and get demoted for that, and then having to call on the premier to step down and later resign, and challenge my colleagues and publicly saying, you know what guys, we lost our moral authority to govern. Something has to change. Those were very difficult choices and very unpopular because I was there all alone at that point in time. They became popular a few months later. That is something that I think was a test for me in leadership, without a doubt. So, and the experience in itself. You know, leadership is also not being only there when things are good, but sticking through when things are bad. And I was in this government when we had the dream team, where every government wanted to be like the Alberta government. We were ranking 85% in popularity. And I was on the team when it was a nightmare team, where nobody wanted to be the government of Alberta, but staying in it and sticking through it and using that experience to correct it. To me, that's leadership.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to Chris, and then Gabor, and then Rob.
Hi, Tom. It's Chris Lee, and in line with the diversification, economic diversification, how do you see the Alberta trade offices play in that role? And part two of that is that, how do you feel about a trade commissioner who makes more than the premier?
You know what, most everybody in Alberta government makes more than the premier nowadays. And if they don't, through severance, they will.
Maybe you should change jobs.
You know, being a premier, you know, for elected office, you want to make sure that you pay a salary that is adequate enough to attract people of some caliber to run for this job. But at the end of the day, no matter what your political stripe is, I don't think anybody gets into politics because of money. There is easier and more money to be made in private sector or elsewhere. There is part of service, so salaries are something that I never look at. But Alberta trade offices are very interesting. I am a big proponent of having Alberta trade offices throughout the world. And I think we need to take a short look at them and see if we have them properly located strategically. Because, you know, it's very popular to be in China and India right now. And everybody is there. Everybody and their dog is there right now. And we're...
Brian's dog.
Yeah.
My dog's not going there.
But real strategy, you know, Wayne Gretzky always used to say, you want to be where the puck is going to be, not where the puck already is. And we haven't been very strategic on where the puck is going to be. We missed Central and Eastern Europe. That ship has sailed. US, Germany, and other countries are already in. There's no room to maneuver for us. But there is another frontier. Countries like Kazakhstan, for example, all the ex-stands of USSR. Some parts of Southeast Asia, Vietnam, where there isn't still a great deal of Western presence. Those are places that I think we should be looking at very carefully, because we can develop some very good economic or academic strategic relationships. But, so that's relevant to location, but staffing is also very important. Those offices cannot be staffed with political appointments. We need those offices staffed with the expertise that you need for that market. So if I'm going to Kazakhstan, and I know that one of the potentials in Kazakhstan is agriculture, I would want Alberta agrologists to be working in that office, who know the business, they know the market, but we have to go one step further. If possible, I would want Alberta agrologists who speak the language and know the culture of that country.